The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
So there was a young man that was a Rosh Kollel in Eretz Yisrael, and he went, he brought his group to this Kollel. He was very, very proud of them, and they learned very hard and like you guys. And he took them to the Steipler. Does anyone know who the Steipler is? The Steipler, not so far away, right? Reb Chaim's father. Now, I'm not an old man. I sat by the Steipler. I was 19 years old. I was a bacher, or 20 years old. I was a bacher in yeshiva, and I was actually, so it's not that far away. You know, it's not even, I sat by the Steipler. I brought a whole list. He gave me a good 10, 15 minutes, which was a memory I'll never forget. But my point in saying that I went there, I'm just trying to bring it closer, that it's not so far away. It's not the Chazon Ish, the Chavetz Chaim. It was a story that happened in our times. Anyway, he goes to the Steipler, and the Steipler tests them, and he was very happy with them. Fine. And as he's walking out, the Steipler says, to the Rosh Kollel, I want to ask you something. So he stays in, and he says, what's your name? Now, he was like a scary-looking man, and he also was hard of hearing, so sometimes you have to write it down. When I went and I had everything written, and I heard him, and sometimes you have to write it down to answer, but sometimes he heard if you screamed in his ear. Anyway, so the Rosh Kollel said, he says, what's your name? He says, my name is Yaakov. And he says, you sure? What's your name? Again, he writes it down. He writes it, he didn't hear me. He writes it down, Yaakov. He says, not Shlomo? He says, no, it's not Shlomo, it's Yaakov. So he says, so why do I see Shlomo written on your forehead? Steipler asked him. And he says, I don't know, but he's thinking, he goes, maybe, I'll tell you a story. Maybe it has to do with this story or not. You tell me. He says, what's the story? He says, a few years ago, he also not only learns with the guys, he collects money. So he has to, Kollel is a very expensive proposition. So he went to Chutz La'aretz, a certain place, and he went to a community. And in this community was the president of the shul, but the Askin, the president of the whole community, was a guy, Mr. Shlomo something. Shlomo, he sat with him, so he could go collect. He could, start off, give him to collect. And I guess he said something that didn't do good for his ego. He took offense, and this Mr. President Shlomo, and he said, okay, you know what? If you say that, like the Torah is the Iker and maybe the Balavatim only, it's not equal share, whatever he said, I don't even know, then you're not collecting any money in this city. And he says, okay, can't stop me. He went around collecting anyway, but he was right. Shlomo made sure he had enough clout that nobody gave him money. He left the town dejected, he said. He went to the next town, and there was a wealthy person there who was also asking, that gave him, and this is years ago, $500, and he was very, very happy, until he found out that this person was Mr. President Shlomo's brother-in-law. And Mr. President Shlomo's brother-in-law found out that Shlomo called him. He says, stop that check. This is not a good guy. So when he went to the bank to cash it, it was a stop check, so he got nothing. He came back to Israel, dejected. He did really poorly. He says, that's the story. He says, you asked me why Shlomo's on there. This is the story. Does it have anything to do with it or not? So listen to this. The Steipler said, yes, exactly. That's it. He said, Shlomo, you were supposed to have a shorter life, whatever the gzera was. There was a gzera on you that you should die. But you got really embarrassed by Shlomo. He really embarrassed you, and he lost his years. And then right after he came back to Israel, got the most part of the story, Shlomo died, a natural death. He says that's the story. He says you were supposed to die, but he embarrassed you, and he lost his years, and his years were given to you. This is the Steipler. This is Meyer Bodner, sort of verified, and it's pretty hard. Just like Korach, just like a lot of people that kills, just like the Chazal say, right? Akina, Taiva, covered, Matziim as Adam min ha'olam. It's going to take you out of this world.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org